A while back, I released a video about Teal Swan. Within hours, she released a video defending herself against the accusation that she's a cult leader. I covered some of the video in another debunk recently, but her video was really long, so I had to split this up into two parts. They stand independently of each other, so you don't have to watch them in any special order. So let's take a look at some of her claims and see if she really is a cult leader. Okay, let's get into it. Before we get into it, I want to point out that she isn't using the BITE model. Most of my followers will know that I usually do use the BITE model to define groups as cults. She's using another cult checklist to see if it applies to her. This one is by the International Cultic Studies Association, or ICSA. It's a perfectly acceptable model to use, but it's a little less broad and more useful for categorizing religious groups as cults, where the BITE model is useful for defining non-religious groups too. There are a lot of one-to-one point comparisons between the two lists, but this one has some extra points. Some of them are slightly modified to be geared toward religious groups. So anyways, that's why I use the BITE model. It can apply to political cults and cults of personality too, not just religious groups. But since she's using this list, we'll go with it. Let's take a look at the first clip. This is where we left off in the last video.
The group teaches or implies that its supposedly exalted ends justify whatever means it deems necessary. This may result in members participating in behaviors or activities they would have considered reprehensible or unethical before joining the group. I find this particular item on this list of criteria ironic, because it is the fact that I encourage honesty with one's family and friends that causes so much of the conflict between people and their family and friends.
You have a creepy laugh. You need to work on that. I'm sorry, it's just hard to watch. So about the point on this list. This is about a group having an ends justify the means philosophy. Jehovah's Witnesses, Scientologists, and other extremist groups have it, to varying degrees, of course. It's okay to lie, cheat, steal, or manipulate if it furthers the group's goals. Jehovah's Witnesses call it theocratic warfare, Scientologists call it the fair game doctrine. So that's kind of what the model is talking about on this point. But let's listen to her response one more time.
I find this particular item on this list of criteria ironic, because it is the fact that I encourage honesty with one's family and friends that causes so much of the conflict between people and their family and friends.
What's really weird is that there's another point on this model that talks about the group having an us versus them mentality that causes conflict with wider society. I'm really not sure why she decided to drop that in there as a defense of this point. It really applies to the other point. But what she said there requires a little explanation. She isn't just encouraging honesty. Honesty is a good thing in most cases. She actually encourages people to be toxic. Embrace the darker side of their personality. Let out your aggressiveness. Release it on the people around you. That's what causes conflict with friends, family, and wider society more generally.
My ultimate goal is to help people to really get in touch with what their personal truth is. If their personal truth is, I don't want to even be spiritual, I don't even care about it, I'm just doing it to try to fix myself, I just want to go be a car mechanic, I'm going to help that person make that decision. Here's where things go a little bit haywire. When somebody starts to find their own authenticity, they start to recognize the places in their life where they're not being authentic because they're afraid that doing so would cause them to lose relationships. Right? So like, let's say you've got mom or dad really wants the kid to be a tennis player. They find that their authenticity is really not to be a tennis player. How do you think mom and dad's going to feel? If it's an enmeshed and unhealthy dynamic in relationship, mom and dad's going to be super, super angry that that person attended the Teal Swan event.
Wait. I'm sorry, I have to pause it here. Let's just step back and listen to this again.
Mom and dad's going to be super, super angry that that person attended the Teal Swan event.
Did she just say, mom and dad is going to be super angry? Mom and dad is. She's referring to more than one thing. Wouldn't it be mom and dad are? I only have so many fuck points in any given video. Usually I bleep it out or use another word, but I'm using my fuck points up right here. What the fuck is happening here? Why the holy fuck do people keep referring to plurals with language designed to refer to singular things? I am straight up miffed right now. Oh, I used up all my heck points. I can't say heck anymore, but I promise you, I am hecked off right now.
If it's an enmeshed and unhealthy dynamic in relationship, mom and dad's going to be super, super angry that that person attended the Teal Swan event and decided they didn't want to do tennis. In fact, instead of accepting that that's the truth of their child, they're going to suddenly have an issue with me.
Again, please stop with the creepy laugh. It is the literal worst. Now, about tennis. Taking part in a sport is a positive thing. But you know what? If the kid doesn't want to do that sport, fine. There shouldn't be anything wrong with them choosing not to. But this shouldn't be about the kid choosing Teal Swan's event over a long-term sport that takes real time investment. You can't choose both? What is it about Teal Swan's events that demand so much time or investment that it pushes other things out of your life completely? If somebody has to choose Teal Swan over other things in their life, then there's a problem with Teal Swan, not with the parents. It's like going to a concert. It's a one-time type of thing. I know lots of tennis players who go to the occasional concert, and it doesn't interfere with their lives in any way. Involvement in the Teal Tribe group shouldn't crowd out your life so much that you start giving up on other things. If that's the case, then there's a serious problem. I love how she says if parents have a problem with the kid getting involved in Teal Tribe, then it's because the relationship is toxic and unhealthy. She's using faux psychology to psychoanalyze an abstract situation in a way that seems like it makes sense, but in reality, it's just another way of defending herself from hate, turning any criticisms against her into criticisms of the other people.
Anytime somebody comes into a space of authenticity, it's going to cause a shift in their social systems, family systems, friend systems, co-working systems. That's because they're interdependent. A change in one causes a ripple effect of change in the rest. And I will be honest with you, social systems are highly resistant to change.
Okay, this is extremely fascinating and gives me a good opportunity to explain a little more about the BITE model and why it's structured the way it is. First, let me address the first point she made. She said anytime somebody comes into a space of authenticity, it's going to cause a shift. When she says authenticity, it's kind of like a dog whistle she's using to refer to that thing I was talking about earlier, where she encourages people to be really toxic and hateful. She's encouraging quote-unquote authenticity. Ultimately, what she's encouraging people to do is embrace the darker parts of their personality. Get them to be really terrible people and revel in it. It's natural, it's normal, embrace it. That's why you'll find that most Teal Swan followers are even more toxic than most other groups' followers. Now, let me address her other point. She said social systems are interdependent and resistant to change. This is kind of a side note, but it's extremely interesting. The reason why the BITE model is structured the way it is, behavior control, information control, thought control, and emotion control, is because those four categories are also interdependent and resistant to change. If you try to control somebody's behavior, they're going to reach out for information on what's happening to them. If you try to control somebody's thoughts, like encouraging them to think in blacks and whites, or encouraging them to reject rational analysis and critical thinking, they'll reach out to people close to them for confirmation that what they're doing is the right thing. You have to control people's behavior, thoughts, access to information, and emotional connections as much as possible, or they'll reach out in one of the ways in which they aren't being controlled as heavily, and you risk losing that control completely. That's why cults do what they do. Now, that isn't exactly what she was saying. It's just that what she was saying made me think of it. Okay, let's continue on.
Subservience to the leader or group requires members to cut ties with family and friends and radically alter the personal goals and activities they had before joining the group. If people who follow my material decide to cut ties with anyone in their life, it is because they themselves have decided that that is the very best thing that they can do for the sake of their own best interests. It will be interesting for those of you to note that even though when somebody makes that decision for themselves, I'm not going to get in the way of that decision. If you follow my material, you do not have to cut ties with anyone. I'm going to show you the negative patterns that you have with anyone in your life, but it's ultimately your decision whether to maintain those patterns, whether to keep that person in your life, whether not to. That is completely and totally up to you.
This is a complete cop-out. She says cutting ties with friends or family isn't a requirement. Okay, that may be, fine. It's not a requirement. But what's the end result? What happens to people who identify, as she put it, negative patterns coming from people in their lives? Negative patterns as defined by whom? Teal Swan? I think we've established that she isn't a psychologist. In fact, the court established it when they ordered her to stop offering psychological advice without having a license. They should have fined her company out of existence for it. And here she is again, quote-unquote, identifying negative patterns for people in her followers' lives. Negative patterns they can use to determine if they should cut ties with them or not. I honestly couldn't possibly care less if she straight up tells her followers to shun friends or family. What I care about is the end result. Do her followers have a tendency to shun friends and family, who she says have negative patterns? And again, where's the higher authority to tell her she's wrong here? Mainstream psychology says that her teachings are not in line with science, but she ignores it.
the group is preoccupied with bringing in new members. In my experience, the people who follow my material, being the people who watch my videos, read my books, attend seminars, or consider themselves members of Teal Tribe, are not preoccupied at all with bringing in new members. If anything, they're a little bit distrustful of doing so.
Please, please stop that laugh. It is awful. You know, when I started out on YouTube, I would tell a joke sometimes, and I would straight up laugh my ass off at the joke. Like, some of the shit I typed up in a script was funny, but by the time I got around to recording the script, the joke was worn out and I didn't find it as funny anymore. So at first I tried to fake a laugh. It sounded terrible. It didn't sound real at all. I asked some other YouTubers how they insert laughs into their final product. One of them told me their brother was walking past one day, and they yelled for them to come in and laugh into a microphone. That's the canned laugh they use every time now. I'll leave you to guess who it was. Anyways, I never mastered the art of faking a laugh. And honestly, have you ever heard somebody on the phone with somebody else as they let out a laugh? It sounds really weird to hear somebody laughing in a vacuum. Laughs are genuinely weird anyways. If you don't do it right, it's not gonna land. I don't know how Teal Swan does her videos, but I'm assuming they're at least partially scripted. I'm guessing she probably writes an outline and then talks off the cuff, but follows the outline. And the shit she says here isn't even that funny. It isn't like a scripted joke or anything. That's probably why it feels like the laughs are so manufactured. They're out of place. I'm sure if she's at a party and yucking it up with some people, her laughs don't feel so synthetic. But take my advice, Teal. This isn't an ad hominem or a personal attack or anything. Just cut the laughs out of your script completely unless it's organic. It sounds very fake. Like I said, even I haven't mastered the art of a fake laugh. It sounds weird and manufactured when I do it too. But you're already known for being a little kooky and unhinged from reality. Whether that's a fair assessment or not, the laugh isn't helping that stigma. Just give it up. I think I might know what the problem is. At least partly. Take a look at this. Boom, right here. The moment the laugh dies, it's dying way too quickly. There's no smile afterward, no nothing. It just goes from this to this. It's just weird. Something very unsettling about it. It falls into the uncanny valley. Okay, I've harped on this long enough. Let's continue.
And also, there's a lot of people in their life they may think might benefit by what I'm saying, the things I'm teaching, the processes that I'm showing people. We really do need to get that sharing content is very different than attempting to recruit people.
Here's the main issue with all of this. I'm not claiming that Teal Swan is setting out to manipulate people. I'm not saying the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses know what they're doing and are intentionally manipulating people into doing this thing or that thing. I don't know their intentions. In fact, if I had to guess, I think I'd probably land on the side of ex-Jehovah's Witness governing body member Ray Franz, who said there may be the odd Jehovah's Witness leader here or there who knows what they're doing and has specifically set out to lie and manipulate people. But he thinks a vast majority of the leaders buy their own propaganda. Since I'm not in Teal Swan's head, I can't say if her intentions are pure or not. Notice I haven't used the words lie or dishonest through this entire video. That's a logical fallacy called appeal to motives. I can say without a shadow of a doubt that she's not telling the truth on something. I can say she's spreading misinformation, no problem. She definitely is. But I don't know her motives or intentions, so I can't and won't say she's a liar or that she's dishonest. That is a very high burden of proof, and I feel like it's a completely unfair tactic to use. As far as I'm concerned, the moment somebody starts throwing those words around is the moment you should realize their assessment was made in bad faith. That's not always the case, but the accusations are used entirely too often when you honestly have no way of knowing if they're true or not. Anyways, sorry for the tirade, but I felt like it was important. The point is that I have no way of knowing what her intentions are, so I'm not going to assume anything about them. What I do notice, though, is the end result of her actions. The end result of things she encourages people to do. Maybe she's encouraging people in a specific direction with the best of intentions. It doesn't matter at all. The end result is her members acting like nutcases, going around and pushing it down people's throats, and cutting you out of their lives if you offer even the slightest criticism. I don't care if Jehovah's Witnesses leadership are the most honest people alive. If the membership is doing something seriously wrong, I'm blaming them for their bad behavior, because obviously something about the lifestyle that they're forcing people into is pushing this type of behavior, and they haven't said a word against it. It's the same with Teal Swan. If her members act a certain way, if it's part of the culture, the blame rests solidly on her shoulders, because she's forming out an entire lifestyle. That's what her quote-unquote teaching materials are all about. Changing your life to be something more in line with her ideals. It permeates every part of your life in ways you'd never expect. Regardless of her intentions, if she isn't discouraging bad behavior like shunning friends and family, and that just so happens to be a serious problem within the group, then the responsibility for that cultural phenomenon rests on her shoulders. I can imagine her counterpoint to this. People might be equally as fervent about my material. They might shun friends and family who don't want to watch my videos. And to that I say, if that's the case, then they haven't watched enough of my content. I have repeatedly spoken about my experiences with shunning and how wrong it is, how deeply it affected me. I lost my mother to shunning. It's wrong. I would absolutely never stand for somebody ending a relationship over my channel. I would sooner delete my channel off the face of the earth and end my career than treat the situation like you do when one of your followers does it. This video is already getting pretty long, which is unfortunate because there's some stuff at the end that I absolutely need to talk about. I was planning on making this a 2-parter, but it looks like it's going to be a 3-parter. I think it'll be worth it. That's all I've got for you for now. Stick around for part 3. If you like what I do and you want to make sure I can continue to do it, you can support me in a few ways. First, you can support me on Patreon. That's probably the best way. But if you want to get something back for your support, you can check out my Teespring. I sell all kinds of shirts and stickers and stuff on there. Second, you can support me by checking out my Etsy store. I sell 3D printed stands for every system, from the original Nintendo to the Xbox One. And finally, if you want to support me in other ways, you can check me out on my other channels. I have the podcast channel, which is where I talk about whatever's on my mind. Politics, social issues, whatever. You can also find it everywhere podcasts can be found. Or you can check out the videos on my main channel where I focus on destructive cults. As it is with most channels these days, I rely on the support of viewers like you to keep my channel alive, so sharing my work is extremely helpful. Anyways, check me out in all those places if you haven't already. Thanks for listening, guys.